I have the opportunity to sit down here today with one of the honorees at the 2018 Dick Vitale Gala, Mike Greenberg. Hey, Mike, how are you?
It's wonderful to be here. Thank you very much.
So let's talk a little bit about, I think people know you from your work on ESPN, but let's go back a little bit. You're a New York native, grew up in New York.
Yeah.
Tell me, were you a Yankees or a Mets fan?
I was a Yankee fan. Both of my parents are from the Bronx originally, so I came by that honestly. When the Yankees lost the World Series in 1976, I remember crying because the Reds were stealing bases mercilessly on Thurman Munson, who was my favorite player, and that broke my heart. And then they won the World Series in 77 and 78, and those were great memories. And growing up in New York, my favorite teams were the Jets, who have not won the championship in my conscious lifetime.
I was going to ask you Jets or Giants.
Oh, Jets, very much Jets. And their last championship is 50 years ago, so I was one. Yeah. The Knicks, whose last championship was 1973. And so all I've really had has been the Yankees to celebrate in my life.
You moved to the Midwest after graduating high school to go to school at Northwestern University. 4 years, and then you had about a 7-year career there. Tell me about the early part of your broadcasting career, covering the Bulls, covering at a great time in their franchise history. The Cubs, the White Sox, the Bears, who, while you were in school, were pretty good, and while you were working there, not so good. What was that experience like for you in Chicago?
I actually had some good years. One of the great things about that, or one of the interesting things about that, is that the quarterback of the Bears, my first year covering them, was Jim Harbaugh, who was one of the honorees at this event with me. So I'm thrilled for that. So I've known Jim now for 25 years or whatever it is. And he was a good player. I think he was underappreciated as the quarterback of the Bears. And then, of course, went on and had a better year in Indianapolis than he ever had in Chicago. But primarily, I covered the Bulls. And if there's anything smart I think I've done in my life, it's that when I've had the opportunity to be around a lot of very successful people, none more so than Michael Jordan, but not exclusively Michael Jordan. And I think the best lesson that I could ever impart upon anyone is when you're around really successful people, observe them. Observe how they go about doing what they do, because you will find a lot of similarities. I mean, there were all these books, you know, The Habits of Highly Successful People, but I didn't have to read any of those books, because if you just observe really successful people, you will learn from them. And I learned a lot from Michael Jordan and spending time around him. I traveled with him for years, up to and including in Sarasota, Florida. So there are a lot of ties to this. But when he was playing for the White Sox, the White Sox in those days, their spring training home was Ed Smith Stadium in Sarasota. So I lived there for 6 weeks and just followed Michael Jordan around. I followed him to the baseball diamond, and then I followed him wherever he went out for dinner, and I followed him everywhere he went. So I have very good memories of Sarasota.
I've heard you share a Michael Jordan anecdote. There's nothing worse as a kid doing a pickup game of basketball, and they pick, one team picks a player, the other team picks a player. Nothing worse than being the 10th last guy picked. The anecdote I remember is, remarkably, you were involved in a pickup basketball game with Michael Jordan where you were the last guy picked. I
wasn't even picked. They only had 9 guys. and I happened to be standing nearby. And so, you know, as anyone can tell looking at me, I've got some game. So I did wind up playing in a pickup basketball game with Michael Jordan, and it is a funny story. But my memories of Jordan, is certainly for something like this, for a conversation like this, that are much more significant, are of his just total determination. Like what I learned from him, and I would apply this to Dick Vitale too, to be honest with you, is a singularity of focus and a total determination. Like Dick Vitale said about, in his mind, at some point in his life, that his greatest priority was going to be the V Foundation, was going to be leaving a lasting impact on the world, and in trying to do everything he can to eradicate pediatric cancer. And his singular determination and focus in the pursuit of that has been inspirational, and it's why being one of the honorees at this is genuinely one of the great honors of my life. Michael Jordan was very much like that. He was singularly focused and determined to be the best basketball player in the world, and nothing was going to get in his way. And it's a good lesson. It's a good lesson, because if you set your mind to something, look, you have to have the ability to do it. I could have set my mind to being the greatest quarterback in NFL history, and it wasn't going to happen. But if you choose a realistic goal, then if you have singular focus and total determination, you optimize your chances of succeeding. And that's how I've approached my career, and that is how Michael Jordan got to be Michael Jordan, and it is why Dick Vitale has raised $20-something million and counting at this gala for cancer research.
Yeah, that's amazing. You know, I was with you at the National Association of Broadcasters Conference in Vegas in 1990. Excuse me, it was 2016, more recent than I'm thinking here. In 2016, and the show that you're well known for, Mike and Mike, was inducted into the NAB's Hall of Fame. Pretty heady stuff. You joined Harry Carey, Jack Buck, the great Vin Scully, Bob Uecker, and others. And I'd like to have you talk about Mike and Mike just for a minute, but in this way. I saw at the Television Critics Association Winter Tour, you talked about the delay in your next chapter of your career, and how maybe that fortuitous that was, because it gave you an opportunity to look back and reflect on Mike and Mike, maybe more than you would have if you had to look immediately ahead to this next chapter. We'll talk about that show in a minute. You referred to it as a mandatory smelling the roses period.
Yeah.
So talk to me just what those reflected thoughts are as you look back on that great experience.
Look, Mike and Mike changed my life. When they asked me to come in and host a radio show for a couple of days with Mike Golick to fill in because they were trying to find a full-time partner for him, and I wasn't even someone they were considering. I was a 29-year-old anchor at ESPN who was primarily anchoring on ESPN News and was trying to get on SportsCenter and was trying to establish myself as a broadcaster of any consequence, and I certainly had not done so. And I went in for a day and filled in, and Mike and I just hit it off immediately, and they offered me the job immediately, and it changed my life. I mean, you know, suffice it to say that the list of things that would never have happened for me in my life had it not been for that show and the success of that show is too long for me to list here. But certainly one of them is that I would never have been an honoree at Dick Vitale's gala or anything, or have had the opportunity to do the work that I've done with the V Foundation, which has been so great. And not to sidetrack the conversation, but I would say that when you set your goal to be a sports announcer, which I did very early in my life, you are making two conscious decisions. You are choosing a career that is going to be fun. You're doing it because you think you will enjoy it and that every day will be fun. And that has absolutely been the case. I like what I do for a living, and I know a lot of people who don't. And I think that would be a difficult way to live life, to get up every morning and sort of dread what you're going to do for work that day. I look forward to what I do for work. So that's a wonderful thing. The trade-off of it is you recognize you're not really doing something that important. You know, I'm not fighting fires, and I'm not fighting cancer, and I'm not making the world safer for people or anything like that. So the work that I've been able to do with the V Foundation, through Mike and Mike, through all of my connections with ESPN, and then through the personal stuff that I've done, have been the few times in my life that I really genuinely have felt like I'm making a difference, that I have been making the world a better place. If the money that we can raise for cancer research does actually save someone's life, if my work saves one person's life, then that's so much more important than everything else that I've done put together. I can't even really comprehend it. So had it not been for the success of Mike and Mike, had it not been for my partnership with Mike Golick, had it not been for what a magnificent person he is and what a magnificent partner he was for me for 18 years, none of this would have ever happened for me. And that's just the beginning of it. I mean, the life that my kids have had the opportunity to lead, the things that my wife and I have had the opportunity to do, everything from I've met 3 presidents, to any number of other things, none of that would have been possible. So, I mean, Mike and Mike is professionally speaking by far the most important thing that ever happened to me, and I am forever grateful for it.
Well, we're sitting here today as you are about to embark on the launch of the next chapter, where you're going to have more fun. Tell us about Get Up, which is the new show that will be airing every morning, every weekday morning from 7 to 10 Eastern here on ESPN. Michelle Beadle and Jalen Rose will join you in this great endeavor. How excited are you for this next chapter?
I couldn't be more excited. ESPN has not ventured into the morning show space, especially. We do SportsCenter in the mornings, and that's been very successful and very good. But the idea of doing something that is more personality-based, that is a little more, excuse me, akin to the shows that the networks do in the morning, and that even all the cable networks now do in the morning, is something that we made the decision that we were going to go ahead and try. And I'm really honored to be part of the team. And like you mentioned, I have a really good team. I mean, I have Michelle with me, and she's ridiculous. She's just so smart and so funny and so good. I mean, the first time that we sat down to do a rehearsal, I really didn't know what to expect. I've worked a lot with Jalen in my life. He's hosted my show with me and been a guest on my show on Mike and Mike with me a million times. I've known Jalen for years. And I know Beetle, but I've never worked with her, really. And so we sat down, and she's not in person. She's not at all the way that she is on the air. She's much more reserved. She's like Dick. If you spend any time with Dick Vitale, in his normal life, Dick Vitale is not like that. The Dick Vitale that the world knows. Dick Vitale does not walk up to you and say, "Oh, you're awesome, baby." You know, he's not that way. Beetle is not that way in person. She's much more reserved and she's calm. And then the camera went on, and we were doing a rehearsal. It was 3, 2, 1, and she started going, and I thought, holy smoke. I better step up my game if I'm going to keep up with this. And so she's just phenomenal. Jalen is the best. So I think we have a terrific opportunity to be a real morning alternative.
Yeah,
for
and
people.
you have our mutual friend Bill Wolf. You have his steady hand on the wheel, program executive with a long
He's
run of success,
you know what he is he's one of these crazy geniuses.
Yeah.
I mean, he is both of those. I mean, he is completely crazy, and he is an absolute genius, and he has become a very, very good friend to me. He was the first person that we hired when the company decided that I was going to be involved in the show. They allowed me to meet with some of the people that they were considering to be the executive in charge. And I met Bill, and the very first thing I told them was, if you want to do this, we have to hire that guy, and he's just the best.
And as a native New Yorker, we should tell people that show will originate from a new studio facility on the South Street Seaport, which has to be exciting for you and everybody associated with the show as well.
Well, it's like a 5-minute walk from where my dad's office was for my whole childhood. My dad was a lawyer, and his office was on Park Place. I so wish he had lived to see this because he would have been so thrilled. I mean, no one loved sports more than my dad did, and no one loved what I do more than my dad did. And he would have loved to see me finally come back to New York. And I will say this, for anyone who knows New York City, you won't believe what's happened in that neighborhood. So the quick backstory on the Seaport is that that neighborhood throughout my lifetime there's really been very little going on down there. It was where you would get the Staten Island ferry and where you would get the ferry that takes you to the Statue of Liberty. And there was very little significant retail or restaurants or anything down there. And then when the city was underwater, when they had the hurricane a few years ago, that's the part of the city that was underwater. And delightfully, when they got it all cleaned up, the city decided they were going to put a bunch of money into rejuvenating or just juvenating that neighborhood, because it had developing, thank you, was the word I was looking for, that neighborhood. And it's spectacular now. ESPN Live will be hopefully a signature piece of it. But I mean, there's magnificent high-end restaurants and high-end retail and a Four Seasons hotel and luxury condos. It's beautiful down there. So that neighborhood has been completely transformed, and hopefully we will sort of be a big piece of it. We have a huge rooftop space where we'll have sporting events and we'll have concerts. So I think that we can be a real difference maker in the transformation of a New York City neighborhood.
So we want to tell people, be sure that you check out Get Up, Michelle Beadle, Jalen Rose, obviously yourself. It's going to be a great mix of news and highlights and analysis. And I think it's going to have a long and successful run.
I
know something about you that many of the viewers might not know, and that is you're a fairly prolific author. Mike has written 4 books that have been on the New York Times bestseller list. One with the aforementioned Mike Golick was called Rules for Sports and Life. You wrote one that could have been my autobiography, which is Why My Wife Thinks I'm an Idiot. Probably a lot of guys out there would agree that could be their autobiography's title. You also wrote a more serious one that was titled All I Could Ask For, and it had to do with something that ties into the Dick Vitale Gala, and that is a tragic early loss stemming from cancer. And the story involved a good friend of you and your wife's, Heidi. Tell us about that book.
Yeah, so Heidi Armitage was a woman that we met because her son, Walker, and my daughter, Nikki, were in a TWOS program together. And my daughter is now 17 years old, so that should give you an indication of exactly how long ago this was. And we met the very first day of that I'd ever taken my daughter to school, and Stacy and I, my wife Stacy and I were there, and Heidi and her husband Adam were there, and we met, and both my wife Stacy and Heidi were pregnant at the time. They were both out to here pregnant, and those in my experience has been that they find each other. Pregnant women find each other in a room, and And so they did, and they became instantly very good friends. And so they had a baby almost immediately thereafter, a little girl named Georgia, and we had our son Stephen. And so we have kids that are exactly the same age. And we remained very good friends for years and years and went skiing together and did all sorts of trips. She was a Canadian descent, and she was a beautiful skier. And in February of 2009, she was diagnosed with breast cancer that had spread to her bones. She fought like hell, but she had no chance. She died on September 30th of 2009. And at her memorial service, which my wife Stacy organized, I was sitting directly behind her kids, staring at the backs of their heads. And I had an experience unlike anything I've ever had before, which was I had been sad the entire time that Heidi was sick and the entire time that I knew she was going to die, and then after she died. And then sitting there at the memorial service, I became unbelievably angry, like angry in a way that I have never really felt before, because it was so unjust. It was just not fair. She was a 43-year-old woman who had a 9-year-old and a 6-year-old and was the healthiest person you ever met in your life, never smoked in her entire life, was incredibly outdoorsy. She did everything in the world they would tell you to do, and she just got dealt this hand that no one could possibly have beaten. And it just was so totally unfair. And then as that night went on, her husband Adam read these letters at the memorial service from a bunch of women that talked about Heidi as their incredibly close friends, and it struck me as odd because I couldn't imagine that she had all these friends that I'd never heard of or met before. Mm-hmm. So very late that night, we were in the kitchen back at my house, and I said to my wife Stacy, "What were those letters?" And she told me something that I did not know, which is that in the last few months of her life, Heidi had become very active on this breast cancer message board, like one of these support message boards. Mm-hmm. And she had developed these very intense friendships with these women that she never met. And these women had written these letters about her as though they were like sisters. And standing in the kitchen, I looked at my wife and I said, "I'm going to write a book about 3 women who meet in one of these places, and we're going to donate all of the money to the V Foundation." And that's exactly what happened. And so that was October, the memorial service of 2009. The book was published originally in April of 2013. We donate every penny that we make to the V Foundation. We're going to make another donation the night of the Dick Vitale Gala of another $50,000. And we will continue to donate every penny that we make from that book to fight breast cancer, as long as people ask me, "Will you ever keep any money from the book?" And I say, "Yes, I will." The day they cure the disease, the day they say no one is going to die of this disease anymore, then we'll keep the money. Until then, we donate every penny that we make from that book to breast cancer.
It's an incredible story of friendship, and what a great thing you've done in her memory. And you're about to give it an encore, because Mike and his wife Stacy have written another book called MVP, which stands for Most Valuable Puppy.
Yeah.
This is most decidedly a children's book, but it's one that adults alike will find heartwarming. And it's the story of your dog, Phoebe. You and your wife and your kids are never mentioned in here by name, but clearly this is autobiographical again, because it's not only about Phoebe, it's about you, who is referred to as the man in the box. Mm-hmm. Think about the box being a TV screen. Your wife, your daughter Nikki, your son Stephen, and again, all the proceeds from this children's book will be funneled through the Dick Vitale Gala and back to the V Foundation, specifically earmarked for the cause of pediatric cancer research. That's just fantastic.
Yeah, so we wanted, after All You Could Ask For, which has done really, really well, I've been looking to find the next project. I didn't want Heidi's Angels, which is the foundation that we formed, to just be a one-time thing. I wanted to find ways to keep it alive. And so when we did this book, the original intention was that we would donate all the money to breast cancer, as we did with the previous book. And right at the time that we signed with Simon & Schuster to do the book, right around that same time, Dick called me and asked me to be the honoree at this gala. And I said to Stacy, you know, it's a children's book. Maybe it would make sense with this honor to do it for pediatric cancer. And the first words out of Stacy's mouth were, Heidi would have loved that. So we decided to change course. So All You Can Ask For, those proceeds will still always go to breast cancer research. But for this one, all of the proceeds will go to pediatric cancer research. And on the night of the gala, I will make the first donation of that. All the money we got in the advance will go to that. And it says it right on the cover of the book. 100% of the author's proceeds will be, and we will donate it through Dick. So Dick has his own grant at the V Foundation. And I'm so honored that he asked me to be a part of this. So he will get all of the money that we get from this book, as long as the book sells. Will go directly to him. Yeah.
Mike, you and your wife really should be commended for that. Let's talk in closing a little bit more about the gala. It's coming up on May 11th in Sarasota. It's one of the social events of the year along the Sun Coast. Your ESPN colleague, Kevin Nagandi, will be back to serve as the MC for the second year. You'll be honored along with Florida State basketball coach Leonard Hamilton, Michigan football coach Jim Harbaugh. We'll also be a couple of special guests there. Chris Berman and Holly Rowe will be honored with V Foundation Spirit Awards. Just promises to be a fantastic night. How much are you looking forward to that?
More than I can tell you. I have been to the event. I had the great honor of introducing Dick Vitale at this event a few years ago. Yep. And I mean, it is, for those who are not aware of it, it is a who's who of the sports world, particularly the college basketball world. And it's really special that Boomer, that Chris Berman is going to be there, because he was the honoree. So each year, Dick honors a football coach, a basketball coach, and then, for lack of a better word, a regular person like us. And Chris was the honoree last year, and then right around that time was when his wife was tragically killed in an auto accident. So I know that he was so sorry that he wasn't able to be there. So it will be really special that Chris is going to be there, and he's such a magnificent person. And as an aside, as a younger ESPN personality, Chris Berman and Dick Vitale are two of the pillars upon which our company was built. So to have the two of them there is fabulous. But anyway, it's a magnificent event. I know that the goal is to try and raise $3.5 million.
$3.5 million.
To fight pediatric cancer.
This is the 13th annual gala. Over the previous 12, just over $21 million have been raised. For most of those years, with all the dollars being earmarked for pediatric cancer research. And as you said, the goal this year, he and his wife Lorraine raise that bar every year. It's $3.5 million. With the efforts of people like you and Jim Harbaugh and Leonard Hamilton, Chris Berman, Holly Rowe, especially what you and your wife Stacy are doing with the book MVP, which people are going to love. I'm sure that Dick and Lorraine will achieve that goal and perhaps then some.
I hope so. Listen, there is nothing better you could do. What could you? What is it you support if you don't support this? I mean, these are children battling cancer, and if you've ever seen not only the kids, we did Mike and Mike. I remember one year from the Cancer Center in Dallas. If you've ever seen the kids there, if you've ever seen the families, you see the parents. I mean, all of us who are parents. To see, what these people are going through, no one needs this more than they need this. And look, there are a million worthy ways you could utilize your philanthropic money, but there is no better way you possibly could than to support the V Foundation, which is solid gold. I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but every penny that is donated goes directly to fighting
Thanks
cancer.
To an endowment that the board of the V Foundation set up. One more thing, this year makes it even more special because we are in the 25th anniversary year. On March 4th, we observed the 25th anniversary of Jim Valvano's famous speech at the very first ESPYs. And April 28th marks the 25th anniversary of his passing. He used to love to quote Ralph Waldo Emerson. And one of his quotes was Emerson's quotes that he would use often, which is nothing great in life is accomplished without enthusiasm. And Mike Greenberg, you have great enthusiasm. I don't know that it can hold up to Dick Vitale's, but it's going to be a great night in Sarasota on May 11th. Thanks for being a part of it.
Thank you very much.